And Labour have inflicted two of the heaviest ever by-election losses on the Tories in Tamworth and Mid Bedfordshire this morning.
The results have been described as one of the worst by-election nights that any government has had to endure. Well, Chairman of the Conservative Party, Greg Hands, joins us now. I'm sure you're going to do your best, Mr Hands, but tough to put a spin on this one, isn't it? And tough to do anything other than just think, oh, disaster.
Well, clearly the results are very disappointing in Mid Bedfordshire and Tamworth. We had two excellent candidates. I thought we fought good campaigns there. If I might, I think the biggest issue, obviously, the legacy issues, if you like, behind, what caused those two by-elections, which weren't very helpful. But I can't say I'm anything but disappointed.
No, of course not. And those issues, you're right, are there. But the second biggest swing since World War II, and many people coming out and saying this really is the nail in the coffin as we look ahead towards a general election. Polling guru, Professor John Curtis, who I'm sure you've heard speak before, has said the Conservatives have not faced such a slew of poor by-election results since the run-up to the 1997 general election, and we all know what happened there.
Well, clearly they're poor results. If I might, though, it does not mean the general election is determined next year. Far from it. After all, these are by-elections, a low turnout. People know that they're not determining who will be the next Prime Minister, who will make up the next government. If I might, the actual number of Labour votes was actually down in Mid Bedfordshire and up only very slightly in Tamworth. So it wasn't the case that people who previously voted Conservative were now coming over to voting Labour. The main phenomenon in these by-elections was previous Conservative voters not coming out to vote Conservative. Now, that's not something I'm complacent over, but that is an opportunity for us to win those voters back to the Conservative column by good, strong government under Rishi Sunak and laying out a vision for the future for a full term under Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. That's the opportunity.
You say opportunity, but surely that's a concern. Because your voters, the people that were loyal, they may not have come out to vote, but they couldn't be bothered to come out and vote. They didn't want to go down there and show their support. You've got Keir Starmer, who's out this morning, who's out celebrating because they've taken these two fantastic by-election results from their perspective. Your voters, your supporters, couldn't be bothered to go and vote for you. That's a concern, isn't it? Not an opportunity.
Well, it is a concern. As I say, it's a concern and an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to win them back, but it is a concern. But you might ask Sir Keir Starmer in Mid Bedfordshire why his vote actually fell in Mid Bedfordshire, for example. So I think for us, yes, they are good results, but there is an opportunity there for us to win back Conservatives who voted Conservative last time.
How are you going to inspire them? Because if it is a year's time till the next general election, we've seen what's been going on. As you say, there's historic issues, certainly in these two constituencies. But how are you going to inspire them to want to turn back the vote? Because right now in the polls, you are way behind Labour.
Well, I think there's two things. First is getting on with the job of delivering good government this year. That's why we're getting on with delivering on the 5 priorities: halving inflation, restoring growth, cutting debt, reducing hospital waiting lists and stopping the boats. But also increasingly laying out a vision for the future for a full term under Rishi Sunak, the sort of things he was laying out at our party conference.
I just want to interrupt you because you might not be able to see, but our viewers can see live pictures of Keir Starmer celebrating with the European Bedfordshire. And you bring up the conference. You bring up the conference. He has just laid that out. And they didn't come out and vote. So what's going to be the difference when you say it's an opportunity? How are you going to maximise this opportunity? Because that grand vision of a different style of government was presented writ large, and they didn't vote. So what new twist can you bring?
Well, look, it's not something that's going to change overnight. We need to continue to lay out exciting new policies for the future, whilst also getting on with the job of governing today. So we saw the start of things at the conference with the new approach on net zero, the Network North, the £36 billion worth of investment going into public transport in the north and in the Midlands, the new approach on smoking, which I think has been very popular, reforms to the A-level system.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you cancelled HS2.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days
In
later,
Tamworth.
the new, which affects Tamworth, you're right, Ben, and then a couple of days later, the new programmes announced turned out that they didn't have the funding either. The whole thing is mired in confusion. And there wasn't a bounce for Rishi Sunak after the conference. So, you know, I realise this is your job this morning to come out and do it, but people have heard this for a long time, 13 years, and they need to know that big change is going to happen on the economy, on the NHS, on the issues that they are despairing of. And I'm not hearing anything that will change their minds and persuade your voters to come and vote for you.
Well, look, there's still... you're right to lay out the scale of the challenge, and that I do not deny. As we saw last night, the scale of the challenge is there. But, you know, we need to continue laying this out, continuing to lay out the case for change and the fact that there is no enthusiasm for Sir Keir Starmer.
Change to what? I mean, it's very well said, the case for change. People do want change. The worry is the change they want is a different government.
Well,
what
I disagree.
Change are you proposing?
Yeah, well, I disagree with the premise in that question, because I think actually people are not saying that they want to have Keir Starmer, Labour, the Lib Dems or anybody else in government. I didn't see a single person at the doorstep saying that, nor did I see that reflected in last night's by-election results. As I say, the Labour vote was even down in Mid Bedfordshire, where Sir Keir Starmer is this morning.
Yeah, but yours were halved.
Well, no, which is
Everyone's
the challenge
was
for
down.
us. The challenge for us is to bring people back who are currently not voting. These are low turnout by-elections, but this is exactly what the national opinion polls are showing us. Need to bring people back who previously voted Conservative into the Conservative column. And we will do that by both delivering good governance today and laying out a strong vision for a changed approach under Rishi Sunak into the next parliament.
Now, that's Rishi Sunak, who we heard yesterday in the COVID inquiry was branded as Dr. Death by, well, the person who is now the government's chief scientific advisor, Dame Angela McLean, in WhatsApp messages. I wonder what that does for Rishi Sunak's credibility when one of his chief scientific advisors is using a phrase like Dr. Death to describe him.
Well, I don't think people would agree with this. This looks back, if I might, 3 years to the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which I think most people view as having been a success, along with the other key government things that were done at the time, like the furlough scheme. This was a response to the economic difficulties that we had 3 years ago in the relatively early stages of the pandemic, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which I think most people, particularly those
I think if you
in the
speak
hospitality industry, think was a big success.
If I may, if you speak to the bereaved families for Justice UK in the COVID-19 inquiry, would disagree with that. This is what Naomi Phillip said, who's a spokeswoman for them. This inquiry has made it clear there's absolutely no consultation with the government's scientific advisors on Eat Out to Help Out, that it contributed to the loss of thousands of lives, put unnecessary pressure on the NHS and plunged the country into a brutal second lockdown. It's unbearable to think that if it wasn't for Rishi Sunak's reckless, unscientific and callous approach, my mum might still be with me. When our current chief scientific advisor has referred to our Prime Minister as Dr. Death, how can any of us have faith in our government if another pandemic strikes?
Well, look, I've got every sympathy with people who lost loved ones during the pandemic. My own father died in the early weeks of the pandemic in a care home. So I fully understand the grief that people feel and their unhappiness. But I don't think that there's any connection between the Eat Out to Help Out scheme and the further rounds of the pandemic.
Other people do. They see the connection because they see that it led to infection spreading, and secondly, it led to a longer, bigger lockdown, which then damaged the economy. I mean, you take your view, they take their view, but the person that's taking this view is now the advisor to your government. Well, you can see why people feel uncomfortable.
Well, I definitely see why people would feel in grief about the loss of loved ones. I 100% get that. But I don't agree with the premise that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme caused or prolonged a pandemic. The UK's experience was broadly the same, if not better, with the early rollout of the vaccination programme, the huge success that we had, the huge success of the furlough programme in supporting the economy. I think most people recognise the UK had a relatively good pandemic compared to many other Western countries. But, of course, it was a difficult experience for all of us.
We're going to have to... many people would disagree with that, but we're out of time, so we can't go on any further. But Greg Cairns, we appreciate your time this morning.
Good
Thank
to
you.
speak to you.